Let's shift gears a little bit. You talk about your family a little bit. You were able to meet your biological mother and talk about how that kind of gave you a big picture perspective on things and what that meant to you.
Sure. So after my mother died, my dad remarried many years later when I was about 24 years old. And she and I had a bit of a tumultuous relationship because I saw her as taking my dad away from me. And so then I ended up I just moved out of home when I was about 20 years old. And I just realized, you know what, my dad deserves to be happy. I don't have to be coming in here and destroying this relationship. And so I've always had a bit of a, I don't know, tumultuous relationships or just a rough relationships with women, with mothers, with nurturing people in my life, which is why my husband, I'm very grateful, is super nurturing and loving. And anyway, when I was 24 years old, I'd been out of home for 3 years and I felt lost. I felt the need or the desire to reconnect with a mothering figure. And so I started searching for my biological mother. And the only thing that I did find was my birth certificate, and that presented me with a lot of information. She was 16 years old. She was unwed. She was living in Surrey Hills, which is about, the outskirts of Sydney, and she was from Scotland. She was from Glasgow. And so when I received that information, I thought that's enough. That kind of paints the picture for me as to what was going on. And then I became grateful for the fact that I was adopted, because had I grown up in Surrey Hills to an unwed 16-year-old, I can't imagine what life I would have lived. So I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to grow up on Manly Beach with a beach-loving family and the last name Beachley and become a pro surfer. I consider it to be a very fortunate twist of fate. So 3 years later, it's now 1999, and my biological mother found me. And her name's Maggie, and she lives in America. She was in San Francisco when I first met her. And so she found out who I was by Google. Don't we love Google?
Right.
Yep. And so she rang me, and basically from the first phone call, it was all too much. She picked up the phone. She went, "Hi, Layne, it's your mother. I'm Maggie. I was 16. I was date raped. You were conceived through rape." And I was like, hang on. Like, this is all way too much information for me right now. And so I hung up the phone, and I just didn't know what to do with it. So I pushed her away. And I realize now that as an adoptee, because we have such massive fears of rejection, that so what we end up doing is we either reject people or we give everyone a reason to reject us. And that's just our fear playing itself out, right? So I rejected her because I didn't want to feel rejected again. And so it's taken us a long time to build up a relationship. I went and met her later that year, and it was like looking into the mirror in 17 years. There was no question that she was my mother.
Wow.
And at the time, all my friends and family going, "Oh, could she be a gold digger, or is she a fame moth?" Like everyone was questioning whether her reasoning was legitimate. But there was no question she was my mother. Now, we've had a tumultuous relationship over the years, but we're actually starting to become a lot closer, a lot more mother-daughter like. And I'm making good effort. Well, I think we are both making effort to reconnect and reignite. And sooner or later, I will feel comfortable with it, because when I wrote my book, when I interviewed her about that, I realized I also equate motherhood with loss, because when my dad remarried Christina, or his second wife, he had a daughter who's 18 years younger than me, my sister Catherine. And she died from breast cancer when I was 30. So I tend to equate motherhood with loss. Losing my first mum at 6, my second mum at 30, having this tumultuous relationship with my current mother. It's I've never really been good with female energy in my life, which is what's enabled me to obviously be comfortable in the ocean.
Yeah, and be a good competitor.
Yeah, feisty competitor.
And I've seen her in action. I was working on the Hawaiian Water Patrol during the Triple Crown years of the early 2000s, and got to watch her in the water with some of the wahine that I grew up surfing with, that I'm like trying to cheer on, like, "Oh, Layne got a good one again. Oh, she's ripping." But
well, I paid my dues out here. And I remember the first time I ever came to Hawaii, it was after I finished high school. Instead of going to schoolies, I came here. And I remember sitting on the beach watching the 5A Billabong Pro at sunset. And I remember just sitting on the shoreline and just staring at it, just going, wow, that is so amazing. It's so far out to sea, and it's so powerful, and it's so overwhelming, but I'm so attracted to it. It had this magnetic allure. I was just so drawn to it. I just want to dive in and see what it feels like. I remember the first time I ever swam at Waimea Shorebreak, it was flat, but just the power of the movement of the ocean, I knew I was in an incredibly powerful place. And so I came back the next year, and it was 1990, so I was 18 years old, 19 years old by then. And I couldn't rent a car, and I didn't know where to stay. And I found a lift. We used to land in Hawaii at 1 a.m. And I found a lift. I hitchhiked, out here. And
the
then
airport.
I found a house to stay. And we used to drive around, Ken Bradshaw's place, always had somewhere to stay, but there was nowhere to stay. And I ended up finding this little caravan up the back of Pipeline, and it rained. It was like an El Nino year. It rained the whole time, and it was up a red, muddy walkway. And I stayed in this caravan, had no running water and no electricity, but it was $10 a night. And I stayed in that caravan for 3 weeks, and I would hitchhike I'd walk down this trail, it was about half a mile, and stand on Kamehameha Highway, and I'd hitchhike from Pipeline to Sunset to go and compete every day. And someone in a truck would pick me up. I had my 7.4 and my 7.6 under my arm. I'd throw them in the back of the truck, and then I'd tap the side of the truck, and off we'd go, and I'd tap again, and he'd stop, and I'd get out, and I'd just surf, and then jump back on another truck that would pick me up and bring me down. So my love affair with Hawaii started very young, and then when I came back here every year, and because I spent so much time out at Sunset, I became Mrs. Sunset, because I just loved it out there. I fell in love with Sunset. Still my most favorite wave in the world.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, give that a round of applause for sure. And I totally remember incredible sessions watching you and the connection to the wave, and just very in rhythm and in sync. And that's kind of what that wave requires.
Well, the good thing about Sunset is it teaches you a lot about yourself. Has anyone in here ever surfed out at Sunset Beach? Well, there's a few people that have surfed Sunset. Yeah, I don't think you have. But
Oh, calling you out, bro.
sorry, Philip. I've seen you surf camis. Oh. Anyway, the thing about Sunset, he's going to kick my ass later. The thing about surfing Sunset is what I learnt from surfing Sunset Beach is it reflects your emotions. So if you paddle out at sunset feeling cocky or arrogant, you'll just cop a random west set on the head. Because there's been a couple of times when I've had a brand new board and I'm feeling so good and I'm paddling out, almost like a pigeon, like, oh, I got this, or cocky. And then a west bomb set would come and break on my head, snap my board in half before I'd even put my feet on it, and I'd get washed in. And Sunset's like, settle down, Gidget. You know who's in charge here, right?
Yeah.
And so then I have to put my head between my legs and go home and grab another board and paddle out almost shy, like, oh, is it okay if I come out again? So that's what I love about Sunset. It's a wave that most people love to hate, but I love it. I absolutely love it because it's such an unpredictable force of nature.
We're going to switch gears just a little. I was thinking about this while speaking with you as an adoptee, which is something I think some of you might be learning for the first time about Layne Beachley. What about little Layne Beachleys running around and that kind of thing? So what's, whether it's natural birth, adoption, whatever, is there something floating around in your head or in your heart that you'd want to do something in that capacity?
Yeah, it's called Aim for the Stars.
Okay.
I have hundreds of kids now
Right.
through Aim for the Stars. I quite honestly, I've never wanted children. And I got really clear on it after quite some time, and I realized I love my life so much, I'm not willing to compromise on that. And so I do my bit by contributing and talking to schools and having my foundation, but I've never wanted children. I've never wanted to replicate me.
Like you said, I'm sure the Aim for the Stars, having been a part of procuring $900,000 over the last few years, has helped a lot of young women.
About 425
Wow.
odd. And I have a stepdaughter too. I have, Kirk has a daughter. So, but I don't, yeah.
You just get the package deal, really.
I know.
Okay.
I married into it.
All right. Cool.